the one thing that I'd like to let the committee know is that there's a couple public hearings, three public hearings are for the April meeting for the town board. And so hopefully we'll be successful in getting them passed and move forward with them. The one thing that, we need to discuss and get it finalized to some degree is on the pavers. And I know we had quite a discussion on that last time with the joint meeting with ECB. And I'd like to find out, what the committee decides to do with that, whether we do it with a code or we do some of the information that Chris sent us, that Kim was so kind to put in the minutes, or how we go about doing that. I never did hear back from Kevin Ovani yet in what they are doing in South Bristol, if it was something that we might benefit from their thoughts. So do you have any input on it, Doug? You weren't here the last time, I don't believe, at the meeting when we talked about pavers with the joint sessions, were you?
No, I wasn't, Gary. So, and I haven't read anything from Chris Jensen, so I don't have any comment.
I don't know if Chris's mine doesn't get out that far, I guess. Is Chris on the meeting this morning? Because I asked him if he could. We'd like to have him there to, hopefully get some more thoughts in regard to the pavers.
Could I not see Chris on the call? No.
Okay.
Could I back up and ask the question that perhaps I missed in the February or March? Has this issue arisen because of numerous zoning variance requests for lot coverage? Why are we looking at this? Everybody's all in favor of permeable surfaces, but I'm guessing that the reason it's coming up is because the variance requests by folks who have smaller lake lots that want to have bigger homes or more lot coverage. Is that correct?
I think that's the case. When we first started this, I talked with Chris on it in regards to it, how much of a problem it was for their department. And because I guess John and Bob indicated they were getting quite a few applications for it. In the past, it's always been handled through the ZBA to make determinations, because naturally every lot is different. And so whether we need a code to cover that, or we can write out the stipulations of, as Chris did there in the Kim's got in the minutes, and go from there and let the zoning board still make the determinations, as they will have to on some of them anyways, I would think, based on the size of the lots.
Well, I think that from the zoning board's perspective, we do not want to legislate through zoning board determinations. And many, and I've got a list of a half a dozen of the last meetings here, many meetings, the issue comes before us about permeable pavers, and the Environmental Conservation Board, in their review of permeable pavers, have suggested and recommended that these permeable pavers be used as a solution when there's lot coverage greater than that is allowable. And again, just to repeat, we don't want, as a zoning board, to legislate based on our zoning board determinations. And I believe that anyone that were to come before our zoning board right now and put forth a good case, I think we've already established a precedent here with the zoning board by allowing permeable pavers, and the last probably half a dozen cases that have come before us.
Okay, but you've allowed permeable pavers as a workaround the lot coverage issue.
I would say in most instances we have.
Oh, okay. Going back to history, and Doug, I see, has left us, but back in 2014 and early 2015, we Doug, maybe Chuck, and I can't tell you who else, but we went through and we redid the zoning in the RLD to try and accommodate both lot coverage and building coverage. And that was the genesis of having the 3 different lot sizes. And the Ontario County Planning Board did a survey, and it seems to me there was something like 60% of the existing lots in the RLD didn't comply with the then zoning regulations. So the town tried to accommodate the folks with the smaller lots. But again, you guys in the zoning board continually get applications from folks who have small lots who want to build larger homes or more gracious facilities than the lots can accommodate. Now, the fact of life is there are a lot of small lots along the lake, and if somebody buys a lot and wants to build a more grand home, I'm not that sympathetic. You know, it's nice that folks want to use permeable pavers, and everybody should be. But the town has already tried to accommodate these smaller lots. If they want to build a more grand home, buy a bigger lot.
You know, I don't think, Tom, with all due respect, I don't think that most instances we're talking about a significant amount of lot coverage. And the reality is that these people that are asking for this are going to find one way to work around it or another. And what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do more than anything, is emphasize a need to motivate people to create an environmentally friendly surface that will protect our lake. And I think we need to motivate people to protect our lake, as opposed to having people use hardscape surfaces. I emphasized that at our last meeting that we had as a zoning board, a person came before us that used permeable pavers for a very large driveway, which I thought was a very environmentally friendly solution. And they were 2% over on the lot coverage, and we could not go and approve that or use that environmentally friendly solution that they were providing for that driveway as a way to approve the lot coverage. Now they're going to work around it, and I don't think that we're going to see them back at the zoning board for that. But that's the type of motivation that I want to see used on the lake. I want to see people using pavers for driveways and large surface areas such as that to protect the lake. And what you're suggesting is that we give no accommodations to people for protecting the lake. And I think that that is counterintuitive.
I don't think again, I'm all for permeable pavers. I'm more in favor of vegetation, and I continue to be unsympathetic to folks that have a need to take a less than a quarter acre lot and cover more than 40% of it. It's nuts. If you're truly an environmentalist, you don't overwhelm a small lot.
I don't think asking for a minimal percentage of excessive lot coverage, if it could be overwhelmed with permeable pavers or accommodated with permeable pavers, is not being a conservationist. I don't think we're asking people that are living on the lake to be conservationists. We're asking them to do the right thing and to protect our lake. That's the motivation behind this. If you don't like it, quite frankly, I don't give a damn, Tom. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. All I'm saying is I want to protect the lake.
I think we both agree. Both agree, but in the situations where it makes sense, the zoning board should make a decision.
I don't care. You folks do whatever you want to do. I'm tired of arguing about it. I'm tired of talking about it. If we want to move in this direction, let's move in it. If we don't, because we don't feel it's the right thing to do, then let's not do it.
What's the rest of you folks think?
Tom, is what you're saying that given that we did make some changes a few years ago created these three different tiers of lot size. And now being asked to give some consideration to allowing permeable pavers to give a slightly larger house size, because perhaps we count only half the coverage of a driveway. If it's installed with permeable pavers, that allows someone to build an even larger house. Is what you're trying to describe something like a slippery slope, that it's just one thing after another?
Are you asking me the question?
Yes.
I think there already have been accommodations for small lots. After we involved the Ontario County Planning Board. We looked at what other towns do. And if we keep giving up more space, it's a cumulative thing. It's one lot at a time. I sympathize with folks that have small lots, but I don't think they have to have more than 40% of lot coverage. If they bought a small lot, live with a small lot, or buy the neighbor next door. Or, permeable paver is still not as good as vegetation. And the cumulative effect of taking all these teeny lots and put monster homes and pools and pavers does not help the lake.
Well, the reality of it is that permeable pavers are no different than natural ground cover. It absorbs the same amount of water.
Well, if it's 100% permeable, yeah. But I mean, if some of it's being covered with some other material, well, it's not quite as the same thing as just grass or.
Yeah, vegetation takes up moisture.
And to take it a step further, if a person puts in a stone driveway, that's considered lot coverage. How does that make any sense?
I'm unsympathetic to it. I'm sorry that the zoning board has to confront it, but the town has already tried to accommodate these smaller lots.
Chris Jensen, you had a comment.
I was just going to touch on the other stuff that I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago. We all worked together. That the thing is, RLD used to be 15% building lot, and no, 25% building lot and 15% building coverage. And they were seeing so many variances every single meeting. So what they decided to do was allow and break it up into 3. They did the lots between 10,000 and 20,000 went to 30% from 25%. Then lots less than 10,000 went from 25% to 40% to allow for this greater lot coverage, this greater building coverage on the smaller lots. That's all my only comment.
Thanks, Chris. Well, what's the committee's decision? To leave it the way it is right now and see if we need to take any action later on and proceed to another topic?
It sounds like we have two options. We either leave it alone, and each particular case will go before the ZBA and it'll be judged based on the merits of the case, or we provide some sort of what we were talking about, credit or allowance for permeable pavements in terms of the regulations. And that's, I think, where Kevin was going to give us some language as to what they did down in South Bristol, or maybe some other options as to how much credit would be provided for. So that's where we are. Either we leave it the way it is, or we consider some sort of credit. That seems to be the two options we discussed.
And I just want to add, okay, on a March 4th meeting, the Environmental Conservation Board recommended using permeable pavers. And this is just done with a quick study. And the October 20th meeting, or October 2020 meeting, Environmental Conservation Board recommends using permeable pavers. November 5th meeting, Environmental Conservation Board recommended using permeable pavers. On the November meeting, Environmental Conservation Board recommended using permeable pavers. On the February meeting, Environmental Conservation Board recommended using permeable pavers. If the Environmental Conservation Board, who we trust as being environmentally conscious people, are recommending the use of permeable pavers, and I've only heard one person here on this board object to it, maybe the Environmental Conservation Board is right. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, at the last meeting we had, Kevin Mulvaney thought it was a good solution. The chair of the Environmental Conservation Board recommended we use permeable pavers. I
Okay,
mean, I
Jack,
understand we might have done this 4 or 5 years ago and looked at this, but if we've learned in the last 4 or 5 years that environmental friendly and permeable pavers are a way to address this, why are we not addressing it?
John,
So Kevin,
I think you're misinterpreting my comments. I am all in favor of permeable surfaces. I am not in favor of eroding our regulations to accommodate larger lot coverage. Permeable pavers are wonderful. The environmental board is always encouraging them. I encourage them. I just do not think that it's a workaround lot coverage.
so Mr. Mulvaney's comments were that, say we have a 40% lot coverage, he was stating that we should reduce it to 30 and allow them to go up to 40 with permeable pavements to promote the use of permeable pavements. So not to increase the lot coverage, but to actually reduce it and give them that 10% or that 10% bonus if they use the pervious products.
I'm all for permeable pavers or any kind of porous surfaces. I just don't think that we should encourage greater lot coverage when somebody's cloaking themselves in some bogus environmental workaround.
The reality is most of these people, when they buy these lots, they're not even familiar with our codes and our ordinances relative to this. But you know what? I'm done creating any animosity on this. I'm not going to speak to this issue anymore. So we as a committee can do what we want to do.
Well, why don't we wait until we see what Kevin has to offer? I'll get in touch with him this week and hopefully he's got some information on South Bristol. And if he has, then I'll bring it up at the next meeting. Is that agreeable with everybody on the committee?
That's fine.
Sure.
That's fine.
I think we're just kicking it down the road, but that's okay.
Okay. You're probably right on that, Tom.
Gary, I will say though, when permeable pavers are used or designated by an applicant, the planning board, and we've seen a lot of them, as John said lately, if it comes to the planning board, we have required as part of our approval, the condition that the detail of that permeable pavement section be shown on the plan, be reviewed by MRB, because that was one of my initial concerns, is just to say permeable pavers, it's very generic. You got to make sure you have the right application in the right area. So moving forward, whether we do give credits for permeable pavements in terms of lot coverage or we don't, I want to make sure the committee realizes that we are going to look at least the detail as how this thing is to be designed, built, and maintained at the planning board level.
So if you do that in your planning board, then some of them I would imagine would not go to the ZBA.
No. Being
No,
the fact that permeable pavement is considered part of the lot coverage, if they exceed the lot coverage by any amount, they still have to go to the ZBA, whether they're using permeable or not. But if they do use permeable, I want to make sure that it is the right application for that particular property.
Okay. Well, let's move along then to another topic. Are you back on, Don?
I'm here, Gary. Were you asking me?
Yeah, I wanted to turn it over to you for, on the parks and things, because we discussed that briefly before also in their previous meeting. And, you got the information. I know Tom sent in some questions because he was away. And I know you received a copy of them as he sent to me. And I don't know if you'd had a chance, probably you were on vacation shortly after that. So you probably haven't had a chance to really look into that, but I'd like to have you touch on the parks plan, if you would, please.
Sure, we can talk about it. I don't know, I don't have Tom's email in front of me. Tom, can you, I'm either happy to walk through the agenda or through the local law if you want, but I think we went over that already. I don't know that you want to spend the time going through all that. If there's specific questions, I know that, excuse me, I know that Jean sent an email out while I was on vacation, Gary, and had copied you, and she had some questions, but scanning through her questions, I'll meet with her, but I believe that all of those matters are already taken care of in the proposed local law. She just didn't necessarily, for instance, she was asking, I'll give you an example, she was asking a question about the park hours are established as sunrise to sunset. And she said, is there a provision to allowing people to stay in cabins? Well, that's covered in another section of the law. So those types of things are already there in existence. In terms of tent camping, those sorts of things, any fees, that was another question that she had asked. Those are types of things that the town board would have to consider at the point in time when we get to that. But keep in mind, we're also getting ready to go through a process with MRB where we look at the uplands of Ononda Park and specifically what the future use and build out of that would be. I would anticipate public hearings and a variety of things. So I don't think that in terms of, I don't think that there's any changes needed to the law in terms of future use other than we were going to allow tent camping. We think that that might be something that might come associated with that by reservation, and then the town board would have to set a fee if in fact they choose to do that at that point in time. But there wasn't anything else specifically in her email that I saw that jumped out as was omitted from the proposed park regulations. So I feel like the public hearing that we're having in April, I think that law is pretty well set. Tom, I know you did have a couple of questions about some things. Do you have that in front of you by any chance?
I do, but it's fairly lengthy and it's mostly editorial crap
Okay.
that you can resolve or Chris Nadler would look at.
Yeah, I think that you may have actually looked at a previous version too. So Nadler had gone through that and I think maybe had edited that. So I think that law is actually, that draft law, I think is in pretty good shape. If anybody has specific questions, I'm happy to go through it, but I don't want to waste your time going through line by line. So.
Is that all right, Gary?
Yeah, it's fine to me, Tom. I have a copy of your email that you sent to Doug and I on that in front of me. Was there anything there that stands out that you would like to have Doug answer now before before it goes before the public hearing?
Not that I recall, other than, things like the definition of a vessel and, the vehicle top issue.
And I remember, like you said about Ananda versus a town, be to change to town parks on different things, and we discussed that, and I think Doug took care of that when you were away.
Yeah, if somebody could just go through and see if it made any difference to them.
I'll look at it, Tom. I know I actually have it here in front of me now. I know you were asking about the difference between like a fishing boat and a motorboat and that sort of thing. So yeah, so we'll go through
They were just nickel dime editorial stuff.
Sure. Yep.
And you also had a question on there in regard to alcoholic beverages at the park, Tom. And it's my understanding it's just for organizations and things like that. Is that right, Doug?
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
I think their issue, or one of the things I brought up was we talk about the sale. I don't think we ever want to have the sale of alcoholic beverages on town property. That enters into a different legal area that Chris Nadler should look at.
Yeah, so we've been working for probably about 8 months with our insurance company on this, and we actually ended up mirroring legislation that's been used by Monroe County Parks and a variety of other parks that our insurance carrier currently covers. And the whole premise behind the facility alcohol beverage permit would be that somebody that's renting a facility, for instance, say Gorham Lodge, where they're having an event inside, maybe it's the chamber, maybe it's, I don't know, some other entity. It would have to be an organization, not just a wedding, not just a party. that they could have a wine tasting, or they could have a sampling, and then they might sell a bottle of wine for somebody to take home with them, those sorts of things. So our insurance company felt very comfortable with actually the legislation, saying that we're good there, that's all covered. They've gone through it. But again, it's because it falls under the umbrella of the entity that's actually has the facility alcohol beverage control permit. And that's why our insurance company was comfortable with it. So it would not allow somebody who wants to get married at Ononda the ability to have a reception with alcohol, because it would have to be an event. It would have to be an entity that's doing it.
Yeah, it's a difficult area. We've all read about the nightmares of somebody having a drink at a social event and so on.
Right.
And driving home.
You set on that then, Doug?
I think so, unless anybody has any questions. I think we're good.
No, Doug, I haven't had a chance to talk to you naturally in the last week or two, but are there some pressing issues that you can see that the ordinance committee should be taking up? Because on today's agenda, all we had was the pavers and also the parks and the rec, chapter.
Right. So the one thing that, and I know we touched on it, I think at the last time I was able to join you, I know we've got a meeting coming up with the folks from Lamar Billboards relative to the billboards. So that's going to be something that'll be coming back around. And then we have the form-based code. I don't know if people have had a chance to look at that yet. I know I still want to spend some time going through that myself, but I think that's probably going to take some time for us to kind of work through that. That's pretty in depth.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything on the new proposed rules. Chris Jensen, can you comment on these sign, what we can and can't do with signs, or is it out of our hands altogether?
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
simply
know.
out of our hands, Tom. Where it's actually involves litigation, and so this is part of a settlement with a litigation where we're moving to digital billboards. Basically, there's a federal law that says if a roadway receives federal funding, including, for instance, State Route 332 or State Route 5 and 20, that a municipality cannot use the amortization over the 10-year period for justification for the monetary compensation. So basically, to make a very long story short, we got sued and we lost. So we've got to update our law. So.
But as far as the LED billboards and stuff, there was talk about removing 4, installing 2 LED ones. Is it possible just to send that through the standard approval process and that sort of thing, rather than having to bring it into ordinance? Or
This is the standard. So there is a proposal. I think do other members have a draft copy of that law? I thought we did.
I haven't seen it.
No, I haven't seen it.
No.
All right, I'll make sure that goes back out. But that I know is kicking around now. I've been in conversation right before I went on vacation with Lamar, and I believe they're planning to do a updated presentation, because they wanted to refamiliarize themselves with everything. That was all happening right prior to COVID, right prior before the lockdown, and so everybody was just getting back up to speed on that. But yeah, I've got it actually right here in front of me. I'm forwarding it to everybody right now.
If state law rules in this regard, why would we need a local law?
Because our local law that is in place is not legal.
Okay, so just take it off the books.
So it's a little bit more to that. And so basically, and to keep it from opening up Pandora's box, we were working with the attorneys that are familiar with these billboards as part of a settlement agreement relative to the lawsuit to update our local law to tighten it up and make sure that it's legal. So
okay,
it'll be coming to you in just a minute here.
Can hardly wait.
I'm sure. We'll be putting one of those up on Coy Road, Tom, so. But
Deer
this really
crossing.
just governs those few sites where those billboards are, the LED type billboards or signs are not going to be allowed in other areas.
That is correct. So as part of the legislation that's been drafted has been crafted so that the existing signs could be replaced or upgraded to digital without allowing new signs, very carefully worded. And the agreement with the current owner of the 4 signs would be that, as Chris had suggested, reducing that number from 4 to 2 as part of the agreement.
Yeah, okay.
And which comes first, the settlement or the change of the law?
Kind of all at the same time. So
Okay.
I actually just forwarded you the proposed settlement as well as their proposed regulations.
Yeah, I think
And
that's what we talked about last meeting with Kathy. She was saying which came first, chicken or the egg.
And this is because of there being a state road.
Because the state road receives federal funding. All 4 billboards are located on a state road that receives federal funding. So therefore, in about 11, 12 years ago, the town of Canandaigua passed a law outlawing billboards.
Right, I remember.
And there was a whole amortization clause in there that was relative to the justification. And so basically, there's a federal law that says that amortization period is not just compensation if the roadway receives federal funding.
I remember when it was passed, I was skeptical as to whether Marion and her group were going to get away with that amortization. Terry remembers.
Just curious,
Oh, yeah.
are those billboards in the right of way of the roads, or are they outside the right of way?
They're all on private property. All 4 of them are on private property.
So because they can be seen from a state
Correct.
or federally aided road, then they apply. That legislation applies. Crazy. Okay. It is what it is.
Are you all done with that, Doug?
I think so. So the other thing is the form-based code. I don't know if everybody's seen this or not. This document, I was just looking at 79 pages of your reading pleasure here. So I know this is on the website. If not, we'll make sure we get it back out to everybody. But that's the next thing coming your way, I think, in terms of our ordinance committee that we've got to work through.
Have we got any serious inquiries as to using some of those lots up at Uptown?
Well, I know that we've got some things that are kind of working through right now. We've got one, for instance, that's in the PUD that is going to be requesting a local law to update the PUD so that it's more in keeping with the Uptown, because the Uptown's not, the form-based code is not in place yet. I know we've got another one that's going to try, I think, to go the route of the MUO and put it more in keeping with the form-based code. So there's definitely some interest, and probably the sooner the better that we get that in place, in terms of not only for development, but also protecting the areas that we're looking to protect also.
Tom, there's a lot that's near and dear to you. It's the lot that KFC wanted to build. Yeah, next to Tom Walls.
Yeah.
And he's in, and I think I said, I don't know if at this meeting or a previous meeting, there would be a good application to move the building up front and put the parking in the rear. So we're going to be talking about a sketch plan. I guess it's next week at planning board about that.
Yeah, we've seen 3 or 4 iterations on that lot.
Yeah, we've all matured on that lot.
So that thing came before us when I was on the planning board, so.
That long ago? Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
That thing's got whiskers like you, Chuck.
Like the chinny chin chin.
And it came before us when I was on the zoning board there many years ago. I was going to put a Kentucky Fried in there supposedly, but it didn't work. So.
Yep. Anyway, it's back.
And Gary, I haven't had a chance to talk to you, Gary, but one thing that came up, I want to say it was prior to COVID, like a year or so ago now. that we never really, I just think we got sidetracked with everything. We had talked about going back to looking at the strategic farmland protection area and the strategic forest protection area, and maybe looking at some of the code relative to the protection of those areas. And we've just never really gone back and done that. It's, those are geographically defined areas, but there's nothing in our code that really protects those areas currently. So I don't know if that's something that the ordinance committee would want to go back and look at and have some additional conversations. I don't have a proposal or anything for you today, obviously, but just to have conversations and start thinking about that.
Well, I would think that we only want to have, one big item on the agenda at a time, some other smaller ones, because whether you're talking, the form-based code or whatever, it's going to be time consuming on that. It's going to take a few meetings, I would think. And we also have, if we didn't bring it up before, the ethics also. Jared talked to me about that because, and I told him that we probably wouldn't get to that till either May or June before I could meet with him and get an idea of what their thought process is, and then come before the committee and, have it presented. So.
And the chicken law, we should bring up a chicken law.
Well,
It'd be a lot of chickens after yesterday, all the chicks.
yeah. Yeah. Are there, I realize that the meeting will be short today, way things look, but are there any other items that any
Well,
committee member would like to bring up?
In the interest of prolonging the meeting, one of the thing I had mentioned, we're seeing a lot of applications involving sidewalks, installation of sidewalks, and it always comes up as who's going to maintain the sidewalk, and that comes up when we're discussing whether there's a need for sidewalk. And I know right now, I think our code is mute as to who
No,
maintains
we
sidewalk.
do have a law in the books as far as the property owners requiring to maintain the sidewalks in front of their homes.
We do. I couldn't find it. Okay, well,
It's
that's
a
good.
local law that was never really put into our code, I believe, Doug.
Yeah, so well, wait, maintaining, let's define maintaining, because it's my understanding. So in the wintertime, the local law requires the homeowner to shovel the sidewalk basically and keep it clear. But it's also my understanding from talking to Jim Fletcher that the highway department actually goes around when there's actually broken sidewalk and actually does the fixes for the sidewalk.
Wow. Okay.
So, but that you're right, Chris, the local law was adopted, we actually discovered, but it was never actually put into the town code.
Maybe we should do that just to have it so people have a place to look it up.
And it's enforced by the CEO.
Mr. Jensen.
Okay.
No,
He's
Mr.
Chief
Zucchini.
Sidewalk Enforcement Officer.
Every winter I go to every place on 332 and they nail the door shut on me when I hand them a piece of paper.
All right. Just trying to make your job easier, Chris. All right. Well, thank you. I started to prolong it.
There was some talk a number of years ago about creating sidewalk districts that, for the maintenance. I mean, the physical maintenance, if they're broken, that that district would have an assessment on an annual basis, ad valorem type thing, similar to some of our other districts that would accumulate funds to replace them when they needed replacement. But I don't think that ever went anyplace, did it, Doug?
No, not at this time. I mean, we can certainly have that conversation. Some of the sidewalks in certain areas are getting older now. And they're starting to need some maintenance. I know even in my neighborhood, some of the sidewalks are broken up, in uneven pavements and those sorts of things. Meanwhile, we continue, it's this ever going balance, right? We want a walkable community. That's what our residents have generally said to us in surveys.
Yep.
But yet, where's the balance, right?
Yeah.
Installing that and paying for that and everything else. So that's some of the challenge, even with the work. I mean, the guys are up there working on Canandaigua Farmington Town Line Road today, and there's sidewalk up there and everything, and who's going to be responsible? It's all stuff. It's a great topic, Chuck, that I'm glad you brought it up. It's definitely something we need to discuss. And Tom, I know you've brought it up many different times over the years and everything too. It's there is the local law, but it's not crystal clear on who's supposed to be doing what.
Well,
The
that, and
village-
that's the response we're getting from developers. We say, well, we're going to require sidewalks, and they look back at the planning board and say, well, who's going to maintain them? We all look at each other and say, well,
Yeah,
we can say the homeowner, but that's just off the cuff. It's not maybe something.
The
that's
village
written
I live
stone.
in, the village has a certain amount of funds every year in a budget. You're required to maintain them, make sure they're not cracked and broken and stuff. And they pay 50% of repair and stuff, but you have to make an application and they have a limited amount of funds in that funds every year. So it's a set amount. So first 100 people that make application get the money. And then after that, it's pretty much all of them. So.
Yeah,
Is that
many
our-
municipalities do it different ways. Many municipalities, and I had shared some information, I can dig it back up. Fairport uses their CHIPS funding for it, but if we took the $200,000 in CHIPS funding out of Jim's budget and said we're going to use it for sidewalks, I think he'd have a heart attack. So,
Yep. Yep.
so it's definitely something that's got to be figured out.
We spent a lot of time on complete streets there, talking about that, and we never really did come to a solution on it. And now when you're talking sidewalks, you're talking concrete, right? You're not talking about walking paths.
Right.
Right. I was referring to concrete sidewalks,
Concrete.
but we have a variety of interesting different pathways. Obviously, Middle Cheshire Road's another big one that's got a not a sidewalk, but it's got a walking path. And then we have stone dust pathways, obviously, and trails also. So.
When we're working on the uptown area, that certainly cries out for a sidewalk district or whatever because of the number of and the variety of abutting landowners. It'd be a good way to solve the maintenance issue in uptown.
yeah.
Yeah, not to detail too much more, but then you get into, is the sidewalk in the right of way, or is it on an easement, or is it on private property? And then you got the trip hazard issue and the liability if someone falls and trips. If it's in the right of way, then the town could be responsible. So there's just a lot of things you got to look at. And I guess what I'm saying today is let's just put it on our radar for something to think about in the future.
Any other items that anybody would like to bring forward today? Well, if not, the next meeting will be May 3rd,
Wow, May 3rd.
and we'll decide, in the meantime, I'll meet with Doug and we'll get something out with you, and I'll make Kim aware of it. She can add it to the agenda that she sends out. And thank you very much for very detailed minutes that you took last time, Kim.
Nice job.
And
Let's do it.
if there's no other things that you want to discuss today, then I'd ask for, excuse me, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second. Okay, well, very good. See you on May 3rd, and hope everyone has a good day. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary.
Well,
Thanks, folks.
Right.